Okay, we're going to continue on reading from David Mortimer Baxter Promises. We are going to read chapter 8, which is the best choice. On Sunday, Joe and Beck came around and we hung out in the park for a little while. The day was nice enough, the sun was shining, and we did some major spying on Mr. McCafferty, my neighbor. Mr. M was digging in his front garden. "What do you think he's doing?" Beck asked. "Probably burying a body," I said. I had a theory about Mr. McCafferty. Mr. McCafferty and his house filled with newspaper piles. Mr. McCafferty and his obsession with watching medical shows. But that's another story. "I thought you were supposed to be watering his plants," said Joe. I nodded. "He's leaving today for his vacation. He offered to pay me, but Mom said it was the least we could do. I was with her at the time. She nudged me, so I promised I wouldn't go without the plants being watered." I was thinking I might get a chance to take a look around without him being there. Anyway, now it's Harry's problem. I explained about Harry taking over my chores. "What did you do yesterday?" asked Beck. Somehow I couldn't tell Beck and Joe about the dress thing. It was just too embarrassing. Also, Joe was in a good mood about the election, and I didn't want to spoil his fun. "Nothing much. I think it might be lunchtime," I said, changing the subject. "Sunday is the day Gran comes to lunch. My Gran is deaf when she wants to be. She has 3 whiskers on her chin, and she drives a sports car really, really slowly. Sunday lunch is always a big deal at our house. We left the park and found Dad extending the dining room table at home. More people were coming. "Are Joe and Beck staying for lunch?" asked Dad. "Uh-huh." The Thornton family said Dad cheerfully. How to ruin a Sunday in one easy step. Invite Rose Thornton over for lunch. Dad and Mr. Thornton were good friends. Dad was always finding ways for the Thorntons and the Baxters to get together. "Suddenly I'm not so hungry," I mumbled as the doorbell rang. "Please answer the door, David," said Dad as loud banging began on the door. Beck and Joe followed me. I opened the door. I got a whack on my chin from Gran's walking stick she'd been using to bang the door. "I've been out here for at least 20 minutes, she complained. "Does that doorbell work?" She peered at Joe and Beck like they were some interesting bugs. "Don't you two have a home of your own?" she asked. Joe laughed a nervous laugh, and Beck sneezed. Joe and Beck were used to Gran's weird ways. Then Gran barged in and shoved a large brown paper bag at me, saying, "Take this. Your mother tells me you're in an election. We'll talk later." Then she sailed into the kitchen. Her stick didn't even touch the ground. I looked inside the bag. It was just some old blue coat with lines on it. I left it on the floor. "Let's go to your place," I whispered to Joe, but it was too late. The Thorntons had pulled up in their shiny new car. Mrs. Thornton waved at us. "Hello there," she called cheerfully. Mrs. Thornton has this way of talking to me like I'm 3 years old. I waved back. Things were going pretty smoothly. Mom and Dad made a roast, which was one thing she can cook. Rose Thornton sat between her mother and Zoe. Joe, Beck, and I sat at the other end of the table. Rose had spent most of the time before lunch texting her friends on her cell phone. The only person she talked to was Zoe. "Rose tells me you design your own clothes," said Mrs. Thornton. I felt my insides freeze. Rose probably knew about the dress. But Rose kept eating and didn't look up. I prayed Zoe wouldn't say something stupid. She didn't. She just talked about her sewing class. Well, I think that's wonderful, said Mrs. Thornton. It's a pity you don't have time to design a victory dress for Rose. A what? Said Zoe. A victory dress. A victory dress for when Rose becomes president. Suddenly, Miss Thornton looked embarrassed. She shoveled some food into her mouth. Delicious, Cordelia, just delicious, she said. I looked over at Mom, who had stopped eating. Dad chimed in. That's right. David and Rose are both running for class president, he said. Well, may the best man win. Or woman, said Mrs. Thornton with a sniff. Or woman, Dad said, chuckling. Where's that bag? Interrupted Gran. Where is it, David? She meant the paper bag I left on the dining room table, and grabbed it from the hallway. Bring it here, commanded Gran. She pulled a suit jacket out of the bag. It had a funny smell, like she had found it in a museum. She pushed it at me. Try it on, she said. I put the jacket on. The sleeves hung down, completely hid my hands, and the jacket came to my knees. Gran nodded her approval. Perfect, she said, tapping me on the chest. David Mortimer Baxter, your grandfather wore this when he became president of the Fine Fellows Historical Society on September 19th, 1957. This is what you will be wearing when you become class president on Wednesday, she announced. Mrs. Thornton gave a nervous cough. Mrs. Thornton looked annoyed and spoke loudly to Gran because sometimes Gran was a little deaf. She said, maybe it was time for a female class president. That really, no offense to David or his family, Rose was probably the better choice. Rose was mature and had a pleasant manner. Rose was nodding like she agreed with every word. Please, said Gran. The job should go to the best person available, and that person is my grandson. Mother, said Dad. Anyone for more dessert? Mom asked brightly. We all know that David is unstable, said Miss Thornton. Now wait a minute, said Mom. But Cordelia, it's true. All that lying and sneaking around. Rose looked uncomfortable. She wasn't above lying or sneaking around. Davy doesn't lie, said Mom. He just bends the truth sometimes. Joe kicked me under the table. I looked over at Rose Thornton and pointed to the door. Joe, Beck, Rose, and I left without anyone noticing. There was way too much noise between the adults arguing and Boris's barking. I wish they wouldn't fight, said Rose. It's none of their business, really. For once, I agreed with her.